So, uh, good afternoon, everyone. I wasn't really going to do any podcast today, and I really was going to talk about the Super Bowl. But there's just so much going on in the news today that actually I was watching it while I was outside, which is the hearing of Pam Bondi, or as I like to call it, the shit show that was. And I'm going to talk about that, but I want to go back and talk about the Super Bowl that was on Sunday. Not the game itself, but the halftime show. Do you remember how when they announced Bad Bunny back in 2025, back all the way back, um, they announced Bad Bunny and the entire MAGA sphere uh, had a tantrum and they were blowing their gaskets. Well, here's the thing: Bad Bunny came about because Taylor Swift left. Because what happened was that Taylor Swift wanted creative control and be paid. Two things, the NFL said no. And when that happened, Taylor Swift said, okay, goodbye. But here's the thing. Last year, they had Kendrick Lamar, which was a rapper. And again, I'm not a big fan of rap, but, and Kendrick Lamar is a Grammy Award winner, not just some hack. They've had in the past also Rihanna, I think was before that. Uh, and I think had U2. I mean, I don't remember U2 as a Super Bowl halftime show, but apparently they had them. And there were a lot of things then that nobody actually said. And I just want to point something out here. The minute Bad Bunny was announced as the halftime show, I already immediately said they are going to the halftime show to start deporting all the Latinos that are going to be there. And they all bitched, they complained, and they all said the same thing. Bad Bunny is a horrible, horrible choice. Bad Bunny is a very horrible choice, and he should be deported immediately because he is not an American citizen. Except except that he is an American citizen. And even today, they're still bitching and complaining that there's even one Republican who's leading an investigation for indecency that what Bad Bunny did. And I posted this, and somebody asked me, what was the indecency? Well, he was holding his crotch. Okay. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but so did Michael Jackson. So do other performers. But how come nobody made a big deal about it then? Previous halftime performers and where now I'm going to make a point here. I'm going to okay. Now they say that Bad Bunny should not have been in the Super Bowl because he sings in Spanish and he's not an American citizen. Great. Now, just to show you how stupid people are, and I'm going to go from 2016 because in 2016, you had the following people performing in the Super Bowl: Bruno Mars, Beyonce, and Coldplay. Beyonce and Bruno Mars are both from the United States. Coldplay is British. Nobody made a big deal about Coldplay back then, did they? He's from the United Kingdom, but nobody had a problem with Coldplay, did they? Then we go into 2020. Okay, you had Shakira, Jennifer Lopez, and Bad Bunny. In 2020, Shakira has two things against her. She's from Colombia, and she's an anti-Semite. Why didn't anybody burst a ball then? Why did nobody say anything then? Why is it, oh, why is Shakira performing? She also sings in Spanish. She put out 2 Spanglish albums, but she performed in the Super Bowl. Why didn't anybody say anything then? Bad Bunny was there also. How come nobody said anything back then either? Whether or not he was a big star back in 2020 is irrelevant. The fact is, Bad Bunny was singing in Spanish back then too. Why didn't anybody say anything back then? Why was it okay then, but it's not okay now? If they're all bitching and complaining that Bad Bunny was sings in Spanish, and he's not an American citizen, why didn't anybody say anything about Shakira and Bad Bunny back then, who both sing in Spanish and have Spanish language albums out? They're both not American. They're both not from the United States, and they both. And while one speaks in, and while one only sings in Spanish, the other one sings in Spanish and English, but has Spanish language albums out. So how come no one said? How come no one said anything back then? In 2021, you had The Weeknd. He was Canadian. He put the entire show together. Why didn't anybody say anything back then? In 2023, Rihanna from Barbados. And last I checked, Barbados is a British colony, which makes her a British citizen. So why did anybody say anything back then? And then in 2024 was Usher. Last year was Kendrick Lamar, as I said, with SZA. And this year, Bad Bunny. The Who performed the Super Bowl in 2010. They're from the United Kingdom. The last 4 performers, there were 4 performers. The Who in 2010, the Rolling Stones in 2006, Paul McCartney in 2005, Sting in 2003, Shania Twain, Canadian, 2003, U2 from Ireland in 2002, Enrique Iglesias and Phil Collins in 2000. Enrique is obviously is Spanish from Spain. Phil Collins is British. And nobody had a problem with that. Enrique Iglesias' father is Julio Iglesias, whose songs were in Spanish. Enrique Iglesias sings in Spanish, has a Spanish language out, but yes, also does sing in English. But no one said a damn thing. And by the way, they're all likely American citizens. So why is it that Bad Bunny is announced as a Super Bowl and the shit hits the fan? Because Donald Trump is a racist and a bigot. And as I told, and as somebody mentioning this to me at a Super Bowl party that I was at, and she couldn't believe it, I said, no, it was always there. But Donald Trump told you it was okay. The minute he opened his mouth and said racist things, they all came out of the woodwork because they said, well, if it's okay for him, it's okay for us. And it's kind of a hypocritical thing because people forget the NFL is an American sport. That's true. But what people don't realize is that it's a world sport. Football is a universal sport, except in Europe they call it soccer. And the Super Bowl is unity. And Bad Bunny understood the assignment, by the way. Bad Bunny did understand the assignment. Bad Bunny brought unity to everybody. He understood the platform. And the NFL asked him to sing in Spanish. And Bad Bunny said no. Not because he didn't want to, but because he's not going to compromise on who he is. Now, you can't be okay with all of these artists that I mentioned. You can't be okay with every of these artists that I meant that you can't be okay with all of these artists that I mentioned in the past. But then Bad Bunny walks up and says, "No." He sings a song in Spanish. And 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 then you can't say, "Well, he's not an American citizen, so why should he be performing in the Super Bowl when it's an American game?" Okay, fine. Then why did you two perform in the Super Bowl? Why did Sting? Why did Rihanna? Why did The Weeknd? Why did Shakira? Why did Shania Twain? If you're going to argue Bad Bunny, then argue everybody else who's not American. Enrique Iglesias, Spanish. Ricky Martin is Spanish. Christina Aguilera also put out a Spanish language album. What is wrong with people representing their country? What is wrong with people forgetting their culture of where they came from? Now, if I was performing in a halftime show and I decided I wanted to sing all my songs in Hebrew, would everybody go batshit crazy and say, "Oh, he's American, but he's singing his songs in Hebrew? Why? Why? Because I can? Because I can? Why can't I? If I identify as a musical artist whose songs are sung in Hebrew, why wouldn't I do that?" And it does take away the meaning when you try to translate it. And if Bad Bunny had caved to the NFL when they said sing in English, he'd lose all credibility for everything he stands for, because he is a perfect role model, and he knows where he knows where he came from, he knows who he is, and he knows that people look up to him and respect him. And when people are saying, "Well, I don't understand a word he's saying because he's sung in Spanish," who cares? It's all about the music. Are people dancing to the music, or are they listening to the words of the music? There are many music festivals out there that might be, raves or blues or things like that, and it's all techno. Techno doesn't really have words, it's all about beats, and it's about the dancing. You don't have to understand the words to have a good time, to enjoy dancing. I mean, where else are you going to get salsa music from, or the cha-cha? And people have to understand that America was Spanish way before it became an English-speaking country, because the United Kingdom is way older than the United States. The United Kingdom is thousands and thousands of years old. America is celebrating its 250th anniversary this year. And America was shortened from the word Americano. Americano is a Spanish version of American, because it's like you're saying in Los Angeles, you're a Los Angelino, because that's a Spanish name. Mexico, you're Mexicano. You understand that? You're a Cuban if you're from Cuba. You understand? So, America, and people say in America you should speak English. But that's an ignorant person, because America doesn't have an official language. In New York alone, where I live, in New York City, there are 4 languages that are spoken here. There's English, Russian, Spanish. And in my neighborhood near me, there's an entire community that's a Russian community. There's an entire community that's a Syrian community, and they speak Farsi because they're Iranians. A lot of Jews are Persian. Sorry, they're Persian. So they speak Farsi. Okay? So you can't say, I want to speak. You can't force somebody to speak a language. And by the way, this is how languages got lost over time because people got assimilated into a country. And when they assimilated, they started speaking the language of the country they were in, which means they stopped speaking their mother tongue. And over the years, it just got lost in translation. I mean, there used to be a language of Latin, Ladino. Ladino is one of the oldest languages that are out there. Who speaks Latin today? The Vatican. The Vatican. Priests. Because they still work with the old world. And so you get that. There are a lot of languages that have been lost over time. Just like there were civilizations that were lost over time. You don't see anybody now that's from the Mayan culture or the Iroquois. Because languages died, because a lot of times these languages died out with these civilizations that spoke them. That's just life. And it's important to know where you came from, because if we don't know where we came from, it could be lost over time in history, and your children will have no idea who they are or why their family is so important. And that's why you have people. That's why you had over the years you have time capsules. I know that when I go to Olympic City, there's a specific spot where they have a time capsule that's buried from the 50s that says don't open until 2030. In 2030, the people who buried that time capsule are long gone. I don't know if they have any. We don't know if they have any ancestors or family that's living now. But to open a time capsule, you'll realize, people that are born today won't realize that there was such a thing as a VCR or a tape recorder or a Walkman, or rabbit or rabbit ear antennas. They wouldn't know this, or even a payphone or a landline phone for that matter. But today's generation has it so easy. They think life is so easy for them because they're growing up today with cell phones, streaming services, TikTok. I didn't have this when I was growing up. I didn't have it. There was no such thing as TikTok when I grew up. There was no such thing as Snapchat or Twitter. I had MySpace growing up. In the 90s, we had MySpace. We had Lisa Frank. We had the after-school specials on TV. We had actual music on MTV. We had TRL. Remember? Every afternoon, we would have Carson Daly introducing us on Total Request Live. He got his start on TRL. Remember? Every day. Back in the day. But yes, things change, and you can't. And they just get more advanced. But language is important because language is one of those things that's important because it's our identity. It's who we are. And if you take that away from us, then what do you got left? And that's what Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand. People speak Spanish because they're trying to maintain the identity of who they are. They're trying to teach their children where they come from if their children are born here. And if the children who grow up don't know who they are, if they genuinely don't have their identity, you can't. And Donald Trump wants to support children who are born here and have never been to their parents' home country. And there's a good chance the children likely don't even speak a language other than English because that's how they were raised and that's how they grew up. And throwing them into, say, going to Haiti. They don't speak French. They don't speak French. Now, of course, they do speak English in those countries, but that's irrelevant because, so you can't be okay with the weekend. You can't be okay with all these other players, all these other performers who sang at the halftime show, who weren't even American. But then Bad Bunny comes, and you're like, "Fuck this guy. We're gonna get ICE. We're gonna deport him." Yeah, where are you gonna deport him to? The guy's an American citizen. And just this week, a Republican, and just this week, uh, just this week, somebody decided that they're going to deport. Conservatives want to deport Bad Bunny. Okay, fine. We're going to deport him to morons. How can you deport an American citizen? And yes, I get the irony that ICE is even kidnapping our own people. But again, how are people in Congress so stupid, so moronic that they can even make a statement like this? How can you deport a guy who's an American citizen? And I'm going to say this again: Puerto Rico is an American territory, and I can't stress this enough. And I can't stress this enough. Yeah, is Puerto Rico part of America? And I'm going to read this so that people understand correctly. And if you don't, here it is. Puerto Rico remains a territory of the United States, exercising substantial internal self government, but subordinated to the U.S. Constitution in areas such as foreign affairs or defense. For this reason, it is not considered to be a full fledged associate state under either international or U.S. domestic law. It is part of the United States, but as an unincorporated territory, meaning its residents are U.S. citizens, but it's not a state and has limited political representation, lacking voting rights in presidential elections and full voting members in Congress, and its relationship with the U.S. is a complex, ongoing debate about its political future, which is true. Puerto Rico has no representation in the House or the Senate. It's organized as a self-governing commonwealth under the authority of the U.S. Congress, similar to Guam or the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, here's the key issue here. People born in Puerto Rico are U.S. citizens, meaning they can travel freely to the mainland U.S. and are subject to federal laws, but they cannot vote in presidential elections, which means Bad Bunny is a United States citizen legally, not neutralized, but legally, because he was born there, which means which means they follow all federal laws and regulations, and they can be arrested as such. Now, they have a resident commissioner in the U.S. House of Representatives, but this representative cannot vote on the House floor. I said they don't have any. I made a mistake. They are represented, but they have no power whatsoever. There's a continuous discussion of or push for a vote on whether Puerto Rico should become the 51st state, remain a territory, or become an independent nation. And they did vote a couple of years ago to become the 51st state, and they said no. So, in conclusion, Puerto Ricans are Americans, but Puerto Rico itself is a United States territory, not a state, which is creating a unique political and social situation. Now, according to History.com, which you can see right here, I don't know if you can, but it's about 1,000 miles southeast of Florida. It is a Caribbean archipelago with a complex colonial history and political status. As a territory of the United States, its 3.2 million residents are U.S. citizens. However, while subject to U.S. federal laws, island-based Puerto Ricans can vote in presidential elections and lack voting representation in Congress, as the U.S. territory is neither a state nor an independent territory. In fact, the fort that's in Puerto Rico is under the Department of Interior, which runs the parks departments in the United States. So, yes, their fort that is in Puerto Rico that I visited, which you should check out if you're ever there, is under the United States Department of Territory, and there's a sign when you enter the fort. There is a sign there that says "Welcome to the fort." I forget its name. I forget the name. Welcome to the fort under the United States. This falls under the United States Department of Interior, which means it's a fort in Puerto Rico that is run by the United States Parks Department. Now, I'm not going. Now, there's an entire history. You can go to history.com and read all this, but I'm not going to read the entire thing because I'm not a teacher giving you a history lesson here. Now, I will say that for hundreds of years, the people of Puerto Rico have fought to decolonize the archipelago. However, there has long been a division over the best way to resolve this issue. Statehood, enhanced commonwealth, in which Puerto Rico would remain in a relationship with the United States but be given more autonomy or independence. According to Ponce Krauss, the legal process to admit Puerto Rico into statehood would require just a few steps. 1, the territory would adopt a constitution in preparation for statehood. 2, Congress would approve it and could impose some additional conditions on the state to ensure it's in harmony with the large federalist structure of the United States. And then 3, Congress would pass legislation admitting the territory as a state. Likewise, through simple legislation, Congress can provide for the independence of a territory, despite its constitutional and legal simplicity. Now, this is what I said. In November 2020, Puerto Ricans voted in a non-binding referendum on statehood. About 53% of Puerto Ricans favored statehood, while 47% rejected it. However, only 55% of Puerto Ricans voted in the referendum. Statehood proponents viewed the results as proof that most Puerto Ricans want the territory to be admitted, but opponents question the validity of the votes, as referendums are non-binding or promoted solely by the pre-statehood. Some people oppose statehood based on the argument that Puerto Rico will assimilate into the United States if it becomes a state. Legally speaking, it's pretty simple. The battle is over trying to convince people to want statehood or to oppose statehood. So there's a mixed bag here. So it's not that they don't want to be, it's that what would happen if they actually did it? What would change? What wouldn't change? And do you lose your American status? You lose your American citizenship status, and there would be a bunch of things. Now, I'm not getting to the entire. Now, you pretty much get the gist of what I'm saying here. So, if you're in Congress, right, you should know the laws of the country overall. And here's the thing: all of these people in Congress, whether it be Republicans or Democrats, they know the laws. Republicans are always knowing what was right and what was wrong. But for some reason, Donald Trump comes in and says, and suddenly he turns the Republican Party into either the MAGA party or Trump's party, where Trump is now pulling the strings. And for some odd reason, these Republicans are so scared of Donald Trump that they care more about their career than their constituents that they're supposed to represent, that voted them into office. And that is not good. But when ICE is telling you we are going to the Super Bowl to deport anybody who's there in support of Bad Bunny, and then we'll deport Bad Bunny, well, that's just ignorant. That's just spreading fear, and that's just trying to rewrite history for Donald Trump's America. And you can't rewrite history. I mean, you could try, but in the school I went to growing up, they taught us the history. Now, I didn't say I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% historical. But also, when I said earlier about Americano, when I said earlier about Americano, I was really talking about was America called Americano? Now, I'm going to give you something, a little history lesson here about America. America is named after the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. I wonder how many people actually knew this, whose first name was Latinized to America in 1507 by mapmaker Martin Muller. Okay, so Americano, came from a Latin word. While Americano is the Spanish Portuguese word for someone from the Americas, from the U.S., Americano as a coffee drink originated from American soldiers. Now, origin of the name. Now, this is what I said earlier. Where you come from is important. What's in a name is a lot. In fact, not everybody had last names. Last names only came about only centuries earlier. And last names came about based on the occupation you did. So if you were a blacksmith, your name was Black. If, the name Schwartz, may the Schwartz be with you, is the translation of Schwartz is black. So if you're a blacksmith, your name was Schwartz. And in Yiddish, we call that word Schwarz. So Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci suggested the islands discovered in 1492 were a separate continent. In 1507, a map was created depicting this new continent as America. Americano is Spanish and Portuguese. In Spanish and Portuguese, Americano refers to anyone from the Americas, which basically means I can be an Americano, and so can you. Or as an adjective, refers to the continent. In these languages, citizens of the United States are often called, I know I'm going to mess this up, estadounidenses, to distinguish them from other inhabitants of the Americas. The name America has been applied to the continent for over 500 years, and it is derived from the Italian name Amerigo. Amerigo. That's pretty much it. So how did America get its name? Because America existed way before the United States. Remember, America existed hundreds of years before the United States existed, and while it was still colonies. The United States only came about after the Constitution was signed in 1776, only because they became united as one to become independent from the British tyranny of King George. And that was 250 years ago. While the colonies may have established it, America was given a name long before America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. The Italian explorer set forth the then revolutionary concept that the lands that Christopher Columbus sailed to in 1492 were part of a separate continent. A map created in 1507 by Martin Muller was the first to depict this new continent with the name America, a Latinized version of Amerigo. Now, I'm taking this information from the Library of Congress, so you can look this up for yourself. A crown jewel in the library's cartographic collections is the map, also known as America's birth certificate. While the map has been much publicized since it was acquired in 2003, the map grew out of an ambitious project in the early years of the 16th century. Wallace Muller's map included dates gathered by Vespucci during his voyages of 1501 and 02 to the New World. Wallace Muller named the new lands America on his 1507 map in the recognition of Vespucci's understanding that a new continent had been uncovered following Columbus's and subsequent voyages in the late 15th century. An edition of 1,000 copies of the large woodcut print was reportedly printed and sold, but no other copies are to have survived. It was the first map printed or a manuscript to depict clearly a separate Western Hemisphere with the Pacific as a separate ocean. The map reflected a huge leap forward in knowledge, recognizing the newly found American landmass. Okay, so that is. Now, here's another. Last year was the 571st anniversary of America Vespucci. In fact, let's see if you can see this. This is a picture of him on a coin. And this is another picture of him as he discovered America. And so it is important to understand that the Spanish have more of a right here than we do, because they were here first. Christopher Columbus wasn't even, Christopher Columbus was Spanish or Italian, depending on who you ask. Some say he was Jewish, but again, that's debatable. But and by the way, here is the map that I was referring to. Los Mules map from 1507. So all this is public knowledge. All this is basically can be looked up. All of this information is public domain. And even in Washington, all we got to do is go to the Library of Congress and look it up. As a congressperson, all you got to do is go to the Library of Congress and get this information and read up about it. You know, they say those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Now, the fact that you're saying that Bad Bunny is an American citizen, well, then based on what I'm saying, then neither are our ancestors. Because it is generally accepted the name America derives from the Italian Empire explorer Amerigo Vespucci, which is probably where the Vespa name comes from too, by the way. I'm not. And it goes back all the way back to 1507, when it appeared on a world map created by the German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller. In honor of Vespucci applied to the land that is now Brazil, the full name, United States of America, was first used during the American Revolutionary War, though its precise origin is a matter of contention. The newly formed union was first known as the United Colonies, and the earliest known usage of the modern full name dates from a January 2nd, 1776 letter written between two military officers. The Articles of Confederation prepared by John Dickinson and the Declaration of Independence drafted by Thomas Jefferson both contained the phrase United States of America. The name was officially adopted by the Second Continental Congress on September 9th, 1776. And as you can see in this map, what is now Brazil was originally tapped to be America. That's what you can see over here. The earliest known use of the name America dates to 1505, when a German poet, Matthias Ringman, used a poem about the New World. The world is a Latinized form of the first name of an Italian explorer, Amerigo Vespucci. So he named it after himself, basically. Who first proposed that the West Indies discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1482 were part of the previously unknown landmass rather than the esteemed limit of Asia. On April 25th, 1507, the map Universalis Cosmographia, created by German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller, was published alongside this poem. The map uses the label America for what is now known as South America, and in 1538, the Flemish cartographer Gerdas Mercator used the name America on his own world map, applying it to the entire Western Hemisphere. Alternative theories suggest that America derives from the Amerisk Mountains of Nicaragua, or from the surname of wealthy Anglo-Welsh merchant Richard Amerike, Amerike. The first documentary evidence of the phrase United States of America dates from a January 2nd, 1776 letter written by Stephen Moylan, Esquire, to George Washington's aide-de-camp Joseph Reed. Moylan expressed his wish to go with full and ample powers from the United States of America to Spain to seek assistance to the Revolutionary War effort. The first known publication of the phrase United States of America was in an anonymous essay in the Virginia Gazette newspaper in Williamsburg, Virginia on April 6, 1776. It is commonly mistaken that Thomas Paine coined the term as pamphlet Common Sense, published in January 1776, but he never used the final form. The second draft of the Articles of Confederation, prepared by John Dickinson and completed no later than June 17, 1776, declared the name of his confederation shall be the United States of America. The final version of the Articles sent to the states for ratification in late 1777 stated the style of the Confederacy shall be the United States of America, and in June of 1776, Thomas Jefferson wrote United States of America in caps. In all capitalized letters, and the headline was the original rough draft of the Declaration of Independence. The draft of the document did not serve until June 21st, 1776, and it is unclear whether it was written before or after Dickinson used the term in his June 17th draft of the Articles of Confederation. In any case, the Declaration of Independence was the first official document to use the nation's new titles. Now, I'm not going to continue reading over here, but you do get the idea here that the name America derived from Spain, Portuguese, and Americano coffee came about because it was named by soldiers during World War II. So the name Americano has a history from it. So if you call somebody in America Americano, you're not wrong. In fact, I'll even do one better for you. Did the Gulf Mexico get named Did the Gulf of Mexico? Now, I want to, so here. So remember back in the day, back in the early presidency of Trump, he changed the name from Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America and then got really annoyed when you refused to call it that. Well, how was the Gulf of Mexico originally named? Up to 1530, European maps depicted the Gulf, though, left it unlabeled. Cortez called it Sea of the North. In Spanish, it's called Mar del Norte in his dispatches, while other Spanish scholars called it the Gulf of Florida, or Golfo de Florida, or Gulf of Cortez, which is Golfo de Cortez. The Gulf of Mexico, which is Spanish for Golfo de Mexico, is an oceanic basin and a marginal sea. It is located in the American Mediterranean Sea. Its river sources go to the Rio Grande Mississippi River, Mobile River, Penco River, Jamapa River, Pescoa River. Its oceans are the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Its basin countries are Cuba, Mexico, and the United States. It's about 930 miles with a surface area of 1,550,000 kilometers. Its settlements are Veracruz, Houston, New Orleans, Corpus Christi, Tampa, Havana, Southwest Florida, Mobile, Gulfport, Metramos, Brownsville, Tampico, Key West, Cabo, Coche, Cancun, Ciudad del Carmen, Cordas, Carlos, Panama City. And Panama City. Now, where did its name come from? The Gulf is associated with the ethno of Mexica, which refers to the Nahuatl-speaking people of the Valley of Mexico, known better as the Aztecs. In Aztec religion, the Gulf was called, I'm not going to pronounce it, it's after the deity of the seas. Believing that the sea and the sky merged beyond the horizon, they called the seas Ilhicuatl, meaning sky water, contrasting them with finite land bodies of water such as lakes. The Maya civilization, that I mentioned earlier, which used the Gulf as a major trade route, likely called the Gulf Naha, meaning great water. Up to 1530, European maps depicted the Gulf through the letter label, as I said. The name Gulf of Mexico first appeared on a world map in 1550 and an historical account in 1552. As with other large bodies of water, Europeans named the Gulf after Mexico, land of the Mexica, because mariners needed to cross the Gulf to reach that destination. And this name has been the most common name since the mid 17th century when it was still considered a Spanish sea. French Jesuits used this name as early as 1672. In the 18th century, Spanish Admiral Lake charts simply labeled the Gulf as Mexican Cove or Mexican Sound. Until the Republic of Texas broke away from Mexico in 1836, Mexico's coastal boundary extended eastward along the Gulf to present-day Louisiana. Among the other languages of Mexico, the Gulf is known as Alahoco, Mexico, Natal, Yu Golfo, Mexico, and Yucatac Maya, and Golfo, Yu, Mexico, and Tozdal. Although there is no formal protocol on the general naming of international waters, Gulf of Mexico is officially recognized by the International Hydrographic Organization, which seeks to standardize names of international maritime features for certain purposes and counts all three countries adjacent to the Gulf as member states. So you could name anything you want, but understand the history of why they are named certain names. And if you're changing the name, the only reason why Donald Trump changed the name was because he's racist. And he didn't want the name Gulf of Mexico because he said that because the United States owns the sea, we should name it Gulf of America. Except we don't own the sea. Nobody owns the sea. The sea is a freedom. There is no. That's why when you're on a ship and and the ship has a casino, they can't open the casino unless you're in international waters because there is no law in international waters. And if gambling isn't legal in wherever your boat is docked, you have to wait till you're in international waters to gamble, right? But the Gulf of Mexico took over shape about 300 million years ago as a result of plate tectonics. The consensus among geologists is that before the late Triassic, the Gulf of Mexico did not exist. It consisted of dry land which included continental crust that now underlies Yucatan within the middle of the supercontinent Pananga. This land lay south of a continuous mountain range that extended from north central Mexico through the Marathon uplift in West Texas and the Ochita Mountains of Oklahoma and to Alabama were linked directly to the Appalachian Mountains. It was created by the collision of continental plates that formed Pananga. As interpreted by Roy, this mountain range was breached. All right, this is a lot of history that I don't need to know. The point is, this has a lot of history. And I'm not going to, and basically what I wanted to say about this was that Bad Bunny's saying he's not American goes back to the fact that America was founded by the Spanish Portuguese, which is why they have the name Amerigo or Americano. And that's why I say it's always important to know where you came from, because those forget. And this is why civilizations died out. Because you assimilate into another culture. And you start becoming one of them. You dress like them. You start speaking like them. And before you know it, you lose the language. You lose your accent. And then you have children. And your children grow up here not knowing anything about their history, not knowing about their culture. And if you don't have an identity, you really don't know who you are. And that's why when MAGA gets pissed off about, oh, this and that, and they don't want to listen to facts. You know how many times I tell somebody who keeps contacting me, prove me wrong, and they just disappear from the conversation, moving on? They're like narcissists. MAGA's like narcissists. Unless you tell them what they want to hear, they will not engage with you. Because they don't want to be wrong. Because in their mind, the only person that's right is their cult master. That's it from 1600. And it's amazing to me that they forget their history, that they suddenly forget everything they've learned in school, everything they've learned in college. And we saw it today at this shit show of a hearing that they had between Pam Bondi and members of Congress. And when Pam Bondi should be disbarred because she, as the Attorney General, can't answer basic questions that are simple. And I saw, and if you, and I noticed that every time we have these hearings, the questioning is different between the Republicans and the Democrats. The Democrats are always wanting the answers because they know what they're doing. Jamie Raskin, who's a very smart person, who taught constitutional law in school, in college, knows what he's talking about. But these Republicans who keep saying, where were the Democrats 4 years ago when Merrick Garland was the Attorney General and Joe Biden was the president? Why didn't he release the files then? Why didn't anybody care about it now? Why do people suddenly have Trump deranged syndrome, which doesn't exist, by the way? And I'm going to say this again quietly because it was an ongoing case. You cannot release files from a case that's pending, from a case that's ongoing. You cannot do that because that is obstruction of justice. And anybody in Congress who are lawyers should know that. You cannot release documents. Why does everybody in this administration, when they can't answer a question, they go, well, Joe Biden this, Joe Biden hasn't been president in 2 years, in over a year. You are the one that's running this administration now. You are the one who has to be accountable for it. Whatever Joe Biden did, that's past. I don't know any president. Harry Truman said it best. The buck stops here because he said, it's my responsibility. I nominate these people to be my cabinet. I nominate these people to run these departments. If they screw up, it's my responsibility and it's on me. It's not, well, it was the other president, it was the other administration's fault, because Joe Biden was seen. Nobody gives a shit. The hearing is about the way you are running this country with ICE, with the Epstein files, with everything. And if you can't answer the question, and if you're not answering a question, but bringing up people that nobody's mentioned in the questions, that nobody's mentioned in the hearing, like who is Chad Mulligan? Pam Bondi's bringing up Chad Mulligan. Who is Chad Mulligan? How come no one knows who this Chad Mulligan is? And Ted Lieu, who basically called Pam Bondi a liar on live television and said, you should resign right now because he caught Pam Bondi in a lie. It's interesting to me. It is interesting to me how the Democrats do their homework, come prepared, showing facts and their sources, no matter how old it is. But then you have the Republicans who aren't prepared, who don't have sources, and try to tell Pam Bondi the great job she's doing. And in Congress, you shouldn't be having a shouting match. You shouldn't be having fights or screaming or belittling each other. You're Congress. You're representing us, the people of this country. You are representing us. And they had this shouting match when Christine Ohm was testifying, when this shouting match when Kash Patel was testifying, Pam Bondi, Jose Maxwell. And by the way, when you have these hearings, they're taking notes. The world is watching this. This is being aired live on national television. We see it. And then Donald Trump wonders why he's losing the elections left and right, why Republicans are starting to resign, why Republicans are turning on him. He's too stupid to realize that he's the one causing his own downfall. Because in the midterm elections, people are going to remember what's going on here. They're going to remember that it was Republicans who took away my health care. They're going to remember that they took away my food stamps. They're going to remember that they took all that away to fund ICE, who are executing people. We're going to remember this. We're not stupid. And luckily for us, we have a governor who actually does care about her people. We're lucky that we have a governor like that. And it's very sad that we are in a position right now in government where everybody is vindictive, thinks they're above the law, thinks they can do whatever they want, but they're puppets. And the most puppet here is Mike Johnson, who failed in his scheme to protect Donald Trump, because Donald Trump lost yesterday. Mike Johnson didn't want to vote to block tariffs. He was protecting Donald Trump. And when he lost that election, he attempted to put blame on the Democrats for it. And I don't understand why Mike Johnson is a Speaker of the House anyway, because he's a fucking moron to begin with, let alone. But tariffs were already ruled by the international courts to be illegal and unconstitutional. And now Trump's only redemption here is with the Supreme Court, who have yet to rule on it. And if they rule against it, well, that's it. The tariffs are as a tax, plain and simple. Tariffs, as Donald Trump wants to tell you, it is good for the economy and it is good for the people because he's gaslighting you. But tariffs are a tax on the American people. If you tax people, things go up in price because someone has to pay those. That someone has to get paid for that. Somebody, and while tariffs have been around for years, but those are tariffs that are needed. But those are tariffs that we don't even know about because they're paid by the companies bringing their products in, whether it be by plane or by boat or by train or whatever. But those are tariffs that needed to be paid. But now when you're tariffing everybody, I mean, Donald Trump decided that if you don't agree with him, we're going to tax you. And we're going to tax you insane amounts of money until we get our way. And I've never seen such a vindictive person in my life who is basically rewriting history because he's a racist and a bigot. And like somebody said, and I said earlier, that I had this conversation with somebody during a Super Bowl party, and I said to this person, I said, no, racism was always here, but Donald Trump enabled it and made it okay. And now you have everybody showing their true colors of who they really are. Remember, we had the Ku Klux Klan. They wore masks because they didn't want people to know who they were, because that person who was a Ku Klux Klan could have been your brother, your neighbor, your son, your brother, your father. They didn't want you to know, but they were racist. They didn't like black people. They burned people's houses. And if you really want to know the taste of what it was to live in the South during the era of the Ku Klux Klan, all you got to do is watch the excellent movie A Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey, which is based on John Grisham's very first book. If you really want to get a taste of what that was like, I suggest you watch that movie. Because we are seeing that today. We saw it in the Holocaust that my people went through. And it wasn't just the Jews, by the way. It was also gypsies that went through the Holocaust too. And we're seeing it again today. What people need to understand is that this country was always an immigrant place. It was founded by immigrants and was built by immigrants. Anybody who came to this country with nothing. They left their families behind until they can afford to bring them here. And they came to this country and they built and they made something of themselves. Their businesses are still thriving today. Donald Trump, New York, most of his buildings were built by immigrants. All his wives are immigrants. Melania, who's in the Epstein files, is an immigrant. We are all descendants of immigrants, whether you choose to admit it or not. There is not one person in this country that isn't a descendant of an immigrant. Why? Because it's not possible. Because my grandparents on my mother's side were from the former Czechoslovakia and Poland. My mother's father was from Poland, and her mother was from the former Czechoslovakia. Okay. My other grandfather, my father's side, was from the Ukraine, which I've been to, in a town called Mukachev, which is simply translated as Mukachevo. Okay, which is where I've been to. I visited my grandfather's hometown. Okay, my parents were born here in America. My mother in the Bronx, and my father in Brooklyn. Okay, his father. I don't know if they ever became American citizens or not. I never asked, and it's impossible for me to do so today. But my grandparents, both of them, were not from this country at all. They were, and they went through the war, every single one of them. In fact, they both lost siblings. My mother never met them because they died in the war. My grandfather, my father's father, never wanted to talk about the war. He never showed me his numbers that were stamped on him. He never showed me that. But I can tell you this, it affected them. My grandfather, my mother's father, it affected him. He always was afraid that he would never have enough on his plate. And so when I was by their house for either the Sabbath or just regular, he would yell at me that I didn't finish my food because he was saying to me that in the war, all he had to eat were potato skins or bread. And so to him, the food is precious. And I learned a lesson. Now, I'm not saying I continue that tradition today, but the lesson I learned is that it did fuck him up emotionally. And that's what ICE is doing. That's what ICE is doing. Ripping families apart, just like the Nazis in World War II did. They're deporting 5-year-old children or using the children as bait to get to the parents. How cruel is that? How cruel is that? How cruel is that? And this is going to scar children for life in many ways possible. Some of them irreparably. And when you're saying this is okay, you don't understand the ramifications of that. But how can you not say it's okay? How can you say it's okay when your own ancestors went through the same damn thing? And they would be offended by this if they knew. And I always like to mention that fact because nobody seems to understand the history. You could say that somebody's not an American citizen. You could say that someone's an illegal immigrant. Hell, you could say someone is an immigrant. But then you're denying then you are denying who you are. Because Trump himself comes from an immigrant family. His family is German. They had the name Trumpf, Trumpf. They only Americanized it when they got here. Is Melania an illegal immigrant? Or is she an undocumented worker? Is she undocumented? Or is she here legally as neutralized? And if Donald Trump wants to undocument all of these people from the 14th Amendment, all these birthrights, then you have to support your own life now, wouldn't you? If 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 Melania is an immigrant and you're deporting all the immigrants who are not documented, if you want to take away their neutralization status, then shouldn't you deport Melania to make an example? Or are you biased because she's your wife and you love her? Or so we think. So understand and understand history, our history. Understand our culture and understand identity because it's who we are that binds us. It's who we are that makes us who we are. Because our identity is how we live. I mean, look at, and I'm going to, I know this is a bad example to use, but look at Superman. Superman has two identities, Clark Kent and then Superman. Clark Kent is somebody that he created so that his identity is secret, but he made his identity of Clark Kent to be a bumbling reporter, right? Superman is a suave hero who knows who he is. He fights for truth, justice, and the American way. And in a way, you can say that Superman is Jewish because he was created by Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, who were two Jews who created Superman during wartime. In fact, most of the comic creators who created all these characters were Jews. And most of these characters were created during the wartime. Perfect example, Captain America was created by Stan Lee, who was Jewish. Stan Lee wasn't even his real name. I mean, Stanley was, but not Lee. Jack Kirby, Jewish. And they all came out at the right time. Superman resonated because he was a hero. He was fighting for truth, justice in the American way. And all of these idiots who were boycotting the Superman movie that came out earlier this summer because he's an immigrant was the most stupidest, ignorant, moronic thing I've ever heard. Because Superman is not a real character. In fact, if you want to have that philosophical argument, I will say Superman is a personification of who we are. Because he is a savior. He is a god, right? Because he can't die unless you give him kryptonite, right? Superman is a man for all the people. Now, okay, I don't want to say he's a god. I apologize. I don't want to offend anybody. He's not like a god, so I apologize for that one. But Superman represents us. He's fighting for the people. He's saving people from the bad people. He's fighting for the truth, the justice, and unity, right? Superman doesn't lie. Tells the truth. He's a hero. We look up to him. And he's there when you need him. Kind of sounds like God if you are a religious person. And that's just to show you how stupid, moronic these people are, who don't know their asses from their elbows because they're trying to deport Bad Bunny. Okay, where the fuck are you going to deport Bad Bunny to? Somalia? Florida? Cancun? Where are you going to deport him to? I'm an American citizen. You want to deport me? Where are you going to deport me to? Israel? Puerto Rico? Where do you want to deport me? I'm an American citizen. So all these idiots are saying, let's boycott Superman because he's an immigrant. Well, by that definition, you should boycott Donald Trump because he's married to an immigrant, right? Some of us are married to immigrants, right? The shooter who killed Renee Good is married to a Filipino, right? Isn't she an immigrant? If she's from the Philippines? The two people who executed Alex Peretti have Spanish names. Aren't they immigrants? Should we deport them? Should we deport Jonathan Ross's Filipino wife as punishment? You're trying to have it both ways, but you can't do that. Immigrants have contributed more to this country than Donald Trump has. Immigrants have contributed more to this country than you or I have, and that's not an insult to anybody here, because that's a fact. Because immigrants built this country. Without the immigrants, this country wouldn't be what it is today. Okay? And I'm going to say this. Black people contributed more to this country than we did. Why? Because they were slaves to the white man. And without the blacks, we likely wouldn't have things today either. Who do you think worked on the sugar cane farms? Who do you think worked on the cotton farms? Blacks. Why do blacks know a lot more about things than we do? Why is farming run by a lot of Spanish people, by a lot of Mexicans, by a lot of black people? Because that's what they know. And it's not a bad thing. That's where they grew up. And farming, by the way, is a good business to have because they make a lot of money on those farms. And I stayed on a farm once, on a cornfield in Amish town. And I spoke to an Amish person about it. It takes a lot of work to grow that corn, to work on a cornfield. It takes a lot of work, a lot of perseverance. And it's not easy work. Milking a cow is not an easy job. So before people bitch and complain about immigrants and how they're destroying this country, think about this. Think about it. Immigrants are the lifeblood of the United States of America. Immigrants keep our country going. The majority of people in jobs today are immigrants. You go to a Chinese restaurant, do you see Americans cooking Chinese food in the kitchen? No. Why? Because the Chinese people know how to cook their own dishes. An American cannot cook a Chinese food. An American can't go into a Mexican restaurant and go into the kitchen and start cooking a proper burrito because they don't know the culture of Mexico or China, and the food wouldn't come out the same. When you go into a Caribbean restaurant, are you going to get a cheeseburger? No, you're going to get Caribbean food. Why? Because the person who runs the Caribbean restaurant is cooking their culture, and it goes back to the same thing. Identity is who you are. You cannot forget where you come from. You cannot forget your mama's recipe. And so you open a restaurant in memory of her, using a recipe to make beautiful, yummy, delicious Caribbean food that you probably can't get unless you go to the Caribbean. You can't make rum here. You can't make coffee here, except in Hawaii, because we're not a tropical place. Donald Trump says he wants farming done here. But it's impossible. You cannot build, certain things can't be done here. And if they were, they'd be twice as expensive than what we pay for it now. And that's why we import and export. But that's not an issue I want to talk about today. And so all of these things that people built, all these people, all these MAGA, all these cults, they're just stupid. They're ignorant. They don't know the history. But immigration is important. Ellis Island would still be open today if we're still needed, because Ellis Island was the entry point to America. If you got approved to come to this country, if your papers were in order on Ellis Island, they would open up that door and say, "Welcome to America." And yes, you can come here. And statistics have shown that immigrants contribute more to this economy than people like you and I. And they may not be able to vote, they may not be able to serve on a jury, but their contributions are enormous. And if we forget that, and if you deport all of the immigrants, who will do those jobs? They are qualified to do those jobs. If there's nobody to do those jobs, who is going to cook that Chinese meal for you? Who's going to cook that Mexican restaurant for you? Who is going to work on the farm? Who is going to work those jobs that we don't know how to do or that we're not qualified to do? With every action, there's a consequence. And the more people that aren't working, the more this economy suffers. But without the immigrants, there would not have been the United States of America. And without the Spanish and or the Portuguese, we may not be here. We may have been here, but it would be an entirely different country. Or we might not be speaking this language. And to be clear, there is no official language of America. And that's by design, because America was created as diverse. And people are free to speak whatever language they feel comfortable in. People are able to speak in whatever language they want to. They shouldn't have to be, as Donald Trump said, learn how to speak English or get the hell out of here. That's being a bigot, because English is the hardest language to learn. And if you learn to speak English and you can't speak anything else, as I said earlier, you lose your identity. You lose who you are. And then you forget who you are and where you came from. And we can never forget who we are and where we came from, because that is something that continues from generation to generation. And if, God forbid, people forget, then the world itself cannot exist. Plus, without any more immigrants in this country, might as well just close up shop and move elsewhere.